The Volanthi had ruled the stars for 3,000 years, and in all that time, they had never known defeat. Admiral Kethfor stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Consuming Tide, and watched plasma fire rain down upon the world. Below, Telara 4 was burning. The planet had been home to the Solari people for 10,000 generations, and now would be home to no one at all. Kethfor's 4 eyes reflected the orange glow of devastation, as city after city vanished beneath his fleet's bombardment. He felt nothing but mild satisfaction. This was the 38th species to fall before the Dominion, and they had all fallen the same way. First came the demands for surrender. Then came the brief and futile resistance. Then came the fire. The Solari had fought bravely. Kethfor would admit that much. Their fleet of 200 ships had charged directly at the Volanthi armada, knowing they could not win but refusing to surrender their world without a fight. It had taken less than 3 hours to destroy them all. Now, their burning wreckage drifted through space like scattered embers, while the real work of conquest continued on the surface below. Kethfor turned away from the viewing screen and walked among his officers. The command deck of the Consuming Tide was a marvel of bioorganic engineering, grown rather than built, its walls pulsing with soft bioluminescence. Every surface curved gracefully into the next, and the air itself carried a faint sweet scent that marked the ship as a living thing. The Volanthi did not build air vessels from dead metal like lesser species. They grew them from engineered tissues, guided them through neural hive links, and shaped them into instruments of perfect destruction. No species in the known galaxy had ever developed weapons capable of matching Volanthi biotechnology. This was simply a fact, as certain as the laws of physics themselves. A junior officer approached Kethfor with hesitation in his movements. "Admiral, our long-range sensors have detected an anomaly." Kethfor's mandibles clicked with mild irritation. "Define anomaly." "A vessel, Admiral, entering the system from the outer reaches. Solari survivors attempting to flee." "No, Admiral, the configuration does not match any Solari design on record." Kethfor paused and turned his attention to the tactical display that dominated the center of the deck. A single marker blinked at the edge of the system, moving slowly inward. "It does not match any known species configuration," the officer continued. "We have attempted standard hailing frequencies, but received no response." Kethfor studied the marker for a long moment. In 3,000 years of expansion, the Volanthi had encountered and cataloged over 400 spacefaring species. Some had been absorbed peacefully into the Dominion. Most had been conquered. A few had been exterminated entirely when they proved too troublesome to subjugate. But all of them had been documented, studied, and understood. This marker represented something new, something unknown under different circumstances. Kethfor might have found this interesting. A new species meant new territories to claim, new resources to exploit, new subjects to bring under Volanthi rule. But today he was busy, and unknown vessels wandering into active combat zones were a distraction he did not need. "Send the Blade of Morning to intercept," Kethfor ordered. "Destroy the vessel if it does not withdraw immediately." "Yes, Admiral." The Blade of Morning was a destroyer, small and fast, more than capable of handling a single unknown ship. Kethfor dismissed the matter from his mind and returned his attention to the conquest of Telara 4. There were population centers still standing in the southern hemisphere, and his bombardment schedule required precision. The minutes passed as plasma fire continued to fall. Kethfor approved targeting solutions, reviewed casualty projections, and authorized the deployment of ground forces to secure strategic resources. The Solari had possessed impressive deposits of rare minerals, and these would serve the Dominion. Well, it was nearly an hour before he thought to check on the blade of morning. Report on the intercept mission. The junior officer who had first brought him the anomaly report looked up from his station with an expression Kethver did not immediately recognize. Admiral, the blade of morning has not reported. Clarify. We have lost all contact with the destroyer. Admiral, it stopped transmitting 43 minutes ago. Kethver felt something cold move through his chest. The blade of morning was crewed by 300 of the Dominion's finest warriors. Its weapons could crack open a small moon. Its shields could withstand direct nuclear bombardment. And it had. Simply stop transmitting. Show me the last known position. The tactical display shifted, and Kethver saw the destroyer's marker blinking red at the edge of the system near it. Growing closer with every passing moment, the unknown vessel continued its steady approach. Magnify visual on the unknown ship. The display changed again, and Kethver got his first clear look at the newcomer. It was wrong. Everything about it was wrong, where Volanti ships flowed with organic curves and living grace. This vessel was angular and brutal, and covered in hard edges. Its hull was dull gray metal, scarred and pitted, marked with what appeared to be welded repair patches. Weapons bristled from every surface in a configuration that seemed almost random. External mounts, exposed mechanisms, raw and primitive engineering that made Kethver's mandibles curl with disgust. This was not a warship. This was a crude assemblage of metal and violence that should not have been capable of interstellar travel, let alone combat. And yet the blade of morning was gone. One symbol is prominent on the hull, the tactical officer reported. Our translation systems cannot parse the language, but I am displaying the characters now. Strange angular marks appeared on screen. White against the gray hull UES, Carthage. Kethver did not know what these symbols meant. He did not know where this ship had come from, or why it had chosen this moment to appear. But as he watched it draw closer, as he remembered that his destroyer had stopped transmitting without even sending a distress call, he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt uncertain, and somewhere deep in his ancient warrior's instincts, in a place he had almost forgotten existed, he felt the faintest whisper of fear. He dismissed it. Immediately, fear was for lesser species. Fear was for the conquered. The Volanti had ruled the stars for 3,000 years, and they had never known defeat. One strange ship would not change. That ordered the fleet to intercept, Kethver commanded. I want that vessel destroyed. 43 warships began to turn toward the approaching stranger, and on the surface of Talara 4, the Solari continued to burn. The unknown vessel moved through space with no apparent concern for the 43 warships. Turning to face it, Admiral Kethver watched its approach on the tactical display and found himself growing increasingly irritated by its speed, or rather, by its lack of speed. The ship was not accelerating. It was not attempting evasive maneuvers. It was simply drifting forward at a pace that a Volanti child might have called leisurely. This was either supreme confidence or supreme stupidity, and Kethver suspected the latter. Full sensor scan. He ordered, I want to know everything about that vessel before we destroy it. His officers worked quickly, and the data began to flow across their displays. The results were not what Kethver had expected. The hull composition is primarily iron and carbon alloys. The science officer reported, refined metals rather than grown materials. Extremely primitive by our standards. Weapon systems, external mounts throughout the hull, Admiral. I am detecting magnetic accelerators, chemical propellant launchers, and what appeared to be nuclear warhead delivery systems. Kethver's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his species' nuclear weapons. This strange vessel was armed with nuclear weapons. The Volanti had moved beyond such crude tools of destruction thousands of years ago. Their plasma lances could vaporize targets at distances Nuclear warheads could never reach there. Gravity wells could crush ships before they ever got close enough to launch missiles, and their neural disruptors could kill organic crews without damaging valuable ship components. Nuclear weapons were relics of a primitive age, useful only against species who had not yet mastered real warfare. Their shields are electromagnetic barriers. The science officer continued, powered by what appears to be a fusion reactor of considerable output, but still far below our standard. Combat ratings, crew complement, approximately 3,000 biological entities. Admiral, their life signs read as oxygen-breathing, carbon-based organisms with dual circulatory systems. A new species, then? Yes, Admiral, unregistered and uncatalogued. This is our first contact. Kethver considered this information carefully. A new species with primitive technology had wandered into a Volanti combat zone. They had somehow destroyed the Blade of Morning, which was surprising, but not impossible. Perhaps they had gotten lucky. Perhaps the destroyer had suffered some mechanical failure at an unfortunate moment. Either way, their luck was about to end. Open a communication channel, Kethver commanded. Let us see who we are about to conquer. The channel opened, and for a moment, there was nothing but static. Then a face appeared on the display. It was alien in a way that made Kethver's secondary eyes blink with involuntary surprise. The creature had only two eyes set close together above a small nose and mouth. Its skin was brown and smooth, with no scales or carapace visible. Dark hair was pulled back from its face, and it wore some kind of uniform in dark blue with metal decorations on the collar. It looked soft and fragile, and entirely unsuited for the violence of space combat. But its eyes were something else entirely. They held a steady, fierce intensity that reminded Kethver of the predator beasts that had once hunted his ancestors. On the Volanti homeworld, this creature was looking at him the way a hunter looks at prey. Unknown vessel. Kethver began. You have entered Volanti Dominion space during an active military operation. Identify yourself and withdraw immediately, or you will be destroyed. The creature did not flinch. It did not look away when it spoke. Its voice came through. The translator is female, and its accent was strange and hard, but perfectly understandable. This is Captain Elena Vasquez of the United Earthship Carthage. Earthgither had never heard this name before. We have been monitoring your transmissions for the past 3 days. The creature called Vasquez continued. We have seen what you are doing to the people on that planet. The Zolari are enemies of the Dominion, and they are being dealt with accordingly. They are civilians, Vasquez said, and something dangerous moved behind her eyes. We have watched you burn hospitals and schools and homes, full of families who pose no threat to you. This is not your concern. Human, withdraw now, and you may live. Human. Vasquez repeated the word slowly as if tasting it. So you know what we are. We know you are primitive and outnumbered and outgunned. This is your final warning. The human captain leaned forward, and her face filled the display. Admiral, I am going to give you a warning of my own. Stop the bombardment, withdraw your fleet from this system, and let the Solari people live. Kethver's mandibles clicked with genuine amusement. You make demands of the Volanti Dominion. You who command a single ship against 43 of our finest warships. You who carry nuclear weapons against our plasma lances. You who are so primitive, you build your vessels from dead metal rather than growing them properly. Yes, Vasquez said simply, and if I refuse these demands? The human's lips curved upward in an expression Kethver did not recognize later. He would learn that humans called this expression a smile. Later still, he would learn to fear it. Then we will make you stop. Kethver cut the communication channel and turned to his tactical officer. Destroy them. 43 Volanti warships opened fire plasma. Lances crossed the void in brilliant streams of superheated death gravity wells, twisted space itself around the human. Vessel neural disruptors pulsed electromagnetic waves designed to fry organic nervous systems. Firepower that descended upon the Carthage in that moment could have cracked the small planet, and the human ship flew directly into it. Kethfer watched the Carthage's shields flare brilliant white under the assault, watched hull plating vaporize and atmosphere vent from ruptures along its length. He watched and waited for the explosion that would mark the end of this brief and foolish encounter. The explosion did not come. The Carthage was wounded and burning and bleeding air into the void. But it was still moving, still accelerating, and then it began to fire back. Kethfer had exactly 3 seconds to realize that he had made a terrible mistake then. His world became fire and death, and the screaming of his crew as the humans showed him what war really looked like. The first Volanti ship to die was the cruiser Amber Dawn. It died because its captain believed that the electromagnetic barriers protecting the Carthage would collapse within seconds under sustained plasma fire. He was correct about this. He was incorrect in his assumption that the humans would wait for their shields to fail before taking action. The Carthage fired while still absorbing the Volanti barrage. It fired with everything it had. Railguns mounted along the vessel's spine accelerated tungsten slugs to a fraction of the speed of light and sent them screaming across the void. Each slug weighed only a few kilograms, but at those velocities, they carried more kinetic energy than a nuclear warhead. The Amber Dawn's bioorganic hull had evolved to resist plasma and radiation and the grinding pressure of gravity weapons. It had not evolved to resist solid metal moving at relativistic speeds. The first slug punched through the Amber Dawn's bow like a fist through wet paper. The second slug tore through its engine section. The third slug hit its reactor core. The Amber Dawn did not explode so much as it came apart, its living tissues shredding into fragments that scattered across 1,000 kilometers of space. Admiral Kethfer stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The Amber Dawn had been a heavy cruiser with a crew of 800. It had been destroyed. In less than 4 seconds, all ships focused fire on the human vessel. He commanded, "Destroy it now." But the Carthage was no longer where his ships expected it to be. While the Volanti fleet had been positioning for a coordinated assault, the human ship had accelerated directly into their formation. It was not trying to escape. It was not trying to maintain distance. It was charging straight at them like a beast of prey that has finally been given permission to hunt. And it was still firing missile pods along the Carthage's hull, emptied in cascading volleys. Dozens of warheads streaked through space, each carrying enough destructive power to level a city. The Volanti point defense systems activated, but they had been designed to intercept plasma bolts and energy weapons. They had not been designed to intercept solid projectiles moving at impossible speeds. The destroyer's serene judgment vanished in a sphere of nuclear fire. The carrier Eternal Conquest detonated as missiles found its fighter base and triggered a chain reaction through its ammunition stores. The light cruiser Whispered Truth tried to turn away and took a railgun slug through its spine that broke it cleanly in half. Kethfer watched ship after ship die, and he could not understand what he was seeing. The Volanti had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. They had perfected the art of space combat over generations of conquest. Their ships were grown from living tissue that could repair itself. During battle, their weapons were elegant instruments of precision destruction. Their tactics were refined to mathematical perfection, and this crude, ugly human vessel was tearing them apart. Why? Kethfer breathed the word without meaning to speak aloud. How is this possible? The answer came from his tactical officer, whose voice had gone flat with shock. "Admiral, the human weapons are not designed for precision. They are designed for volume of fire. They are hitting everything." Kethfer looked at the display and finally understood. Volanti warfare was surgical. A Volanti captain would identify a target and destroy it with minimal expenditure of resources before moving to the next target. One shot, one kill. Clean and efficient and elegant. The humans did not fight this way. The Carthage was firing continuously in all directions at once. Its railguns were sending streams of projectiles across the void like a predator slashing with claws. Its missiles were launching in waves that saturated entire sectors of space. Its point defense guns were filling the gaps with smaller caliber rounds that would have been harmless individually, but were deadly in their thousands. The humans were not trying to hit specific targets. They were trying to hit everything, and everything they hit died. This was not warfare as the Volanti understood it. This was not the measured application of force to achieve strategic objectives. This was violence in its purest form. Raw and savage and utterly without restraint. This was the doctrine of overwhelming response. The Carthage took hit after hit as it carved through the Volanti formation. Its shields had failed completely. Now its hull was scarred and burning atmosphere leaked from dozens of breaches, and Kethfer could see bodies tumbling into space where compartments had been torn open. But still it fought. Still it killed. The battle cruiser Immortal Glory fired its gravity lance at point-blank range and crushed the Carthage's forward section like paper in a fist. The Carthage responded by ramming a full missile volley directly into the Immortal Glory's exposed flank. Both ships reeled from the exchange, but only one of them continued firing. The Immortal Glory drifted dead in space, its bioorganic systems too damaged to regenerate. The Carthage kept moving. Kethfer realized then that he was watching something unprecedented. He was watching a ship that did not know how to surrender. He was watching a crew that had accepted death before the battle even began and were now simply trying to take as many enemies with them as possible. He was watching humans at war, and in that moment, Admiral Kethfer of the Volanti Dominion learned a truth that would haunt him for the rest of his life. The Volanti had spent 3,000 years conquering species who wanted to survive. The humans did not seem to care if they survived. They only cared about winning, and that made them more dangerous than anything the Dominion had ever faced. Admiral, his communications officer, called out, "3 more ships have gone silent. The humans have destroyed 21 of our vessels. 21 ships in less than 15 minutes against a single enemy. Order a tactical withdrawal." Kethfer heard himself say, "All ships fall back to safe distance and regroup." It was not a retreat. The Volanti did not retreat. It was a tactical withdrawal, but as Kethfer watched his remaining ships turn away from the burning human vessel, he knew that he had just given an order that no Volanti admiral had given in 3,000 years. He had ordered his fleet to run from a single ship. And somewhere on the surface of Talara 4, the Solari were still alive to witness their enemies flee. Captain Elena Vasquez stood on the bridge of the Carthage and tasted blood in her mouth. The deck beneath her feet was tilted at an angle that made walking difficult, and the air was thick with smoke from burning electronics emergency lights cast everything in a red glow that made the blood on her crew's faces look black around her. The survivors of her bridge team worked at damaged consoles with desperate efficiency. The stations were dark, and the officers who had manned them were either dead or evacuated to medical bays that were probably just as damaged as the bridge. "Forward railguns are offline," her weapons officer reported. "Portside missile pods are empty. Starboard pods have maybe 30 warheads remaining. Engine status: we have 40% thrust capacity. The main reactor is holding, but the secondary systems are failing one by one." Vasquez nodded and felt something sharp shift in her chest-broken ribs. Probably she had been thrown across the bridge when the gravity lance hit them, and only her safety harness had kept her from being crushed against the far wall. "How many did we get at 24 confirmed kills?" "Captain, another 3 probable. Their fleet is withdrawing to safe distance. 27 Volanti warships destroyed or disabled." The Carthage had started this battle knowing it would not survive it. Had exceeded every expectation. Vasquez moved to the central display and looked at the tactical readout. The Volanti fleet had pulled back to a position well outside the Carthage's effective weapons range. They were regrouping, and there were still more than 15 ships out there. The Carthage could not survive another assault. Everyone on this bridge knew it. Everyone on this ship had known it before they ever jumped into this system. The Carthage was old. She had been built 112 years ago, during a time when humanity still thought it was alone in the universe. She had served in 3 interstellar conflicts, been decommissioned twice, and spent the last 40 years in a mothball fleet orbiting Neptune when Earth's deep space sensors detected the Volante expansion moving toward human-inhabited systems. The United Earth government had exactly 3 options. They could surrender and hope for mercy from a species that had shown none to anyone else. They could evacuate and run knowing that there was nowhere far enough to escape forever, or they could fight. The Carthage had been pulled from retirement because she was the only capital ship that could be made battle-ready in time. Her crew had been assembled from volunteers who understood exactly what they were signing up for. 3,000 men and women from every nation on Earth had looked at the intelligence reports and seen what the Volante did to conquered species. They had watched recordings of burning cities and mass executions and systematic extermination, and they had volunteered anyway because humanity had always been like this. Vasquez thought of her grandmother, who had grown up in a small country that had been invaded by a much larger neighbor. Her grandmother had told stories about resistance fighters who knew they could not win but fought anyway because some things mattered more than survival. She thought of ancient warriors who had held a mountain pass against an empire, knowing they would die but buying time for their people to prepare. She thought of frozen harbors and ships that refused to surrender even as they burned. She thought of beaches and bridges and walls and all the places throughout human history where people had stood against impossible odds, not because they expected to win, but because someone had to stand. This was what it meant to be human. This was the weight of history that every member of her crew carried with them. They were not fighting to survive. They were fighting to send a message. Captain, her communications officer spoke up. The Solari Planetary Defense Network is attempting to contact us. Put them through. A face appeared on screen. Alien, but recognizable as one of the species the Volante had been exterminating when the Carthage arrived. The Solari had large dark eyes and smooth blue-gray skin, and at this moment the individual on screen was weeping openly. Human vessel. The Solari said in broken trade common, "We have watched what you have done. We do not understand why you came to save us. We are nothing to you. We are strangers." Vasquez felt something tighten in her chest that had nothing to do with her broken ribs. "You were people being murdered," she said simply. "We don't need more reason than that. You are dying for us. We were always going to die here. The only question was whether we would make it count." The Solari was silent for a long moment. "Is there anything we can do?" "Anyway, we can help you." Vasquez shook her head. "Get your people to safety. Use the time we bought you to prepare for what comes next, and when other humans arrive, tell them what happened here." Other humans. We were the first ship that could reach you in time, but we were never the only ship. Earth is coming, all of us. And we do not abandon people who need our help. The communication ended, and Vasquez turned back to her crew. They were watching her with expressions she knew well. They were afraid. They were exhausted, and they were ready to keep fighting until they could not fight anymore. "The Volante are regrouping," she said. "When they come again, we will not survive the engagement. I want all non-essential personnel to begin evacuation procedures, get to the escape pods, get to the surface, help the Solari survive." "Captain," her first officer said quietly, "what about you? Someone has to keep the guns firing as long as possible. I need volunteers to stay with me." Every single person on the bridge raised their hand. Vasquez felt tears prick at her eyes and blinked them away. "Navigation. Plot and intercept course for the enemy flagship." "Aye, Captain. Weapons. I want every remaining warhead armed and ready." "Aye, Captain." And someone get me an open channel to that. The Admiral. She had one more message to deliver before the end. Admiral Kethver stood in the center of his damaged command deck and tried to make sense of what had happened to his fleet. The consuming tide had survived the battle largely intact, but the same could not be said for the rest of his armada of the 43 warships he had commanded at the start of this engagement. Only 15 remained capable of combat operations. 28 vessels had been destroyed or disabled by a single enemy ship. 28 Kethver had commanded fleets. In 7 major campaigns across his career, he had overseen the conquest of 11 species. He had never lost more than 3 ships in a single battle. And now he had lost 28 to a primitive vessel made of dead metal and crewed by a species no one had ever heard of. Admiral. His communications officer interrupted his thoughts. The human vessel is hailing us. Kethver felt his mandibles tense. Put it through. The same face appeared on his display. Captain Elena Vasquez looked worse than before, if that was possible. Blood ran freely from a gash on her forehead, and her uniform was torn and burned in several places. One of her arms hung at an angle that suggested serious injury, but her eyes were the same. That fierce, predator intensity had not dimmed at all. Admiral Kethver, she said, and her voice was steady despite her obvious pain. I wanted to speak with you one more time before we finish this. Finish this. Kethver repeated the words with disbelief. Human, your ship is dying. You have perhaps hours before your life support fails completely. There is nothing left for you to finish. You might be surprised. I have 15 warships remaining. You have a burning wreck. Surrender now, and I will grant your crew quick deaths. Vasquez laughed, and the sound sent a chill through Kethver's secondary hearts. Admiral, I am about to give you something far more valuable than my surrender. I am about to give you information. What information could you possibly have that would interest me? Information about humanity, about Earth, about what is coming for your dominion. Kethver said nothing, but he did not close the channel. The Carthage is 112 years old. Vasquez continued. She was built during a time when we humans were still fighting among ourselves, still learning what we were capable of. She was pulled from retirement because she was the only ship we could get ready in time. Your point. My point, Admiral, is that this old, broken ship just killed more than half your fleet. This relic of our past has shown your dominion what happens when you threaten innocent people in front of humans. Vasquez leaned closer to the camera, and Kethver saw something burning behind her eyes that was not pain. Earth has 400 more ships. Modern ships. Ships that make the Carthage look like a child's toy. And right now, every single one of them is being crewed by volunteers who watched what you did to the Solari. You are bluffing. Am I? Check your sensor logs, Admiral. Calculate how much damage we did with technology you consider primitive. Now imagine what we can do with a century of advancement. Imagine 400 ships with weapons that make our railguns look like throwing rocks. Imagine a species of 8 billion people who've just discovered that there are monsters in the universe that murder children. Kethver felt the cold sensation in his chest spreading. Your war of conquest is over. Vasquez said, you just do not know it yet. You have spent 3,000 years preying on species who wanted to surrender. Species who valued survival above all else. You have never faced a species like us. And what makes you so different? We evolved as persistence predators, Admiral. Do you know what that means? It means we chase our prey until it dies of exhaustion. It means we do not give up. It means that when you hurt us, we do not surrender, we get angry. She coughed and blood flecked her lips, but she kept talking. You have made humanity angry, Admiral. You have shown us exactly what you do to innocent people, and you have made us understand that we cannot share a galaxy with creatures like you. There will be no negotiation. There will be no peace. There will only be war until one of our species no longer exists. You would doom your entire species to extinction. We would doom ourselves to anything before we let creatures like you keep murdering innocents. That is who we are, Admiral. That is what you have awakened." The channel flickered, and Kethfer saw alarms flashing on the human bridge behind. "Vasquez, her ship was finally dying. I have one final request," she said. "You are in no position to make requests. Tell your Dominion what happened here. Tell them about the Carthage and her crew. Tell them that we came here knowing we would die, and we did it anyway because we could not stand by and watch innocent people burn." Her voice was fading now, her strength clearly failing. "And tell them this, Admiral. Tell them that the Carthage was just the first. Tell them that humanity is coming. All of us. Every ship and every soldier and every person who saw what you did and decided that some things are worth dying for." The connection crackled with interference. "My name is Elena Vasquez, and I am the captain of the United Earth ship Carthage, and today my crew and I have shown the Volanti Dominion what humans are made of." She smiled that terrible predator smile one final time. "Run home, Admiral. Run home and tell your masters what you have learned, and then pray that it is enough to make them surrender. Because if they do not, the next ship that comes will not be alone." The channel went dead. Kethfer watched on his sensors as the Carthage's remaining power failed. He watched as hundreds of escape pods launched from the dying vessel, streaking toward the surface of Telara 4, where the Solari would welcome them as heroes. He watched as the great ugly ship finally went dark and drifted lifeless in the void, surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet. Then he gave an order he had never imagined giving: set course for Dominion space. Maximum speed. "Admiral, what about the Solari?" "Our mission. The mission is over. We are leaving." His officers stared at him with shock and confusion, but none of them argued. They had seen what he had seen. They had learned what he had learned. As the remnants of his fleet fled the Telara system, Kethfer composed a message to the Dominion High Council. He told them about the human ship called Carthage. He told them about the weapons that killed with brute force rather than elegance. He told them about a captain who smiled while dying because she knew her death had purpose. And he told them that in 3,000 years of conquest, the Volanti Dominion had finally made a mistake. They had found a species that was not afraid to die. 6 months later, the first human fleet crossed into Volanti space. At its head flew a newly commissioned battleship fresh from Earth's orbital shipyards. Its name painted in white across the bow was U.E.'s Vasquez, and aboard that ship and every ship behind it were humans who had seen what the Dominion did to innocent people. Humans who had watched the Carthage's final battle. Humans who had volunteered knowing exactly what awaited them. The age of Volanti supremacy had ended. The age of humanity had begun.